at this point in the training kit, we're going to start to focus a little bit more on the body and starting to focus more on the secondary skin tones and just really starting to add a little bit more detail to the large overall body of this creature. Okay, so here's where we left off with the claws in the last video. Okay, let me go ahead and turn on my UV snapshot, and here's the body that we're going to be working with. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and first of all, let's start working with the underbelly of the creature, which that is actually right here on the sides. This UV layout is actually split right down the middle of this creature's belly. So what I want to do is let's first of all find a lighter color, and I'll try and go ahead and find just a real light gray color should work. And the first thing I want to do now is go ahead and find a brush, and then probably need to fine-tune it in order to get the look that I want. So I'm going to go ahead and open up the brushes palette. Okay, so I'm starting out with this 59 splatter. Okay, now I'm probably at this point going to have to go in and take up this diameter, because what I really want to do is have a larger brush that takes up a little bit more area. Okay, so it looks like something at about 100 is going to be about the right size for this. Okay, now what I can do is start to turn on some of these shape dynamics and really try and make this just look very random, but at the same time very natural. Okay, so what we can do is go to this brush tip shape in the brushes options, and let's start to make some of the same adjustments that we did with a similar area of the face a little earlier in this training kit. Okay, so let's take the spacing out. Looks like it's going to be about 60% spacing. Like I said, I try to usually get the spacing to about the point where these brush patterns just barely start to touch each other. Okay, at the shape dynamics, I really don't want the pen pressure to control the size. Okay, so I'm going to set my pen pressure off, so that way the stroke pretty much stays the same size the whole time. Similar to what we had to do at an earlier point in this kit, I wanted to go in and take the angle jitter up quite a bit. So that way each one of these brush points, it has a completely different rotation, and it gives it that nice random look. Okay, so let's go ahead and maybe add a little bit of scattering to this. Let's say about something about 50%. Looks like that's going to work good. And the opacity jitter, let's go ahead and link that to pen pressure. And that looks like that will do it. Okay, so let's go ahead and close this palette. And the first thing I want to do is let's go ahead and instead of using my pen, what I can do is actually use my mouse. And I guess what I first of all need to do, forgot to make a new layer. So let's call this one, let's say underbelly. Okay, so as I was saying, what I really want to do instead of using my pen to make this first initial stroke, what I'd really like to do is go in and actually use my mouse. And that way what I can make sure that I get is 100% coverage right at this center point. Okay, and that's actually going to be pretty important later on. So I have 100% color right at this point in the underbelly. Now I can start to take my pen and start to taper this color out a little bit more. So I'm going to use these same little circular patterns to sort of blend everything together. Okay, and I'll start to carry this white color up a little higher. Okay, one thing that we do want to be aware of is these areas right here where the UV layout actually ends. You're going to want to make really sure that you don't carry this speckled pattern beyond this border. because otherwise what will happen is you'll wind up with this very noticeable edge in the texture. So one thing that we're going to want to definitely be sure of is that we don't cross this line whenever making this speckled pattern. And if we do cross that line, we're going to want to make sure that we at least go in and remove it. Okay, so I'm going to keep making this lighter pattern. And you'll notice that with this speckled pattern up front, I didn't go beyond this this boundary of the UV layout. And again, for the same reason, if I went beyond this line, what we'll wind up with is a very noticeable line in the texture. And unfortunately in Photoshop, that's just something that you kind of have to learn to work around. These problems like this, where it's extremely difficult to get the texture to match up perfectly in some of these areas. So we kind of have to, like I said, in some of these areas, use a little bit of creative deception, more or less. Okay, so what I'm doing right now is switching to my eraser tool and getting an eraser brush set up to where I can go back and erase some of these areas that have crossed over this UV line. Okay, so I'm pretty much setting up a eraser brush that is just like my paintbrush. So a little bit of angle jitter, a little bit of opacity jitter linked to the pen pressure. Okay, and now I can go back and with my eraser tool go back and clean up some of these areas that have crossed over this UV line. Okay, so in the next video we'll go ahead and continue working with this underbelly of our monster.